If you live with a cat, there's a sound you recognize immediately, and it's not the crash itself. It's the sound right before it, that soft little scrape that makes you look up from whatever you're doing because your brain already knows what comes next. You don't even need to see it yet. You just know your cat is on a surface they probably shouldn't be on, and there's an object sitting a little too close to the edge. When you do look up, your cat isn't frantic or wild. They're calm, focused. One paw reaches out, slow enough that you have time to say their name in that hopeful tone that never works, and then the object tips, disappears, and hits the floor like this was always the plan. Your cat watches it fall without flinching, and for a second, you're left standing there, wondering how something so small can feel so deliberate. It's easy to laugh it off or get annoyed or assume your cat is doing it just to get a reaction, especially when it happens again the next day, and the day after that, and somehow always when the room is quiet. But once you start paying attention, you realize this isn't random behavior, and it isn't new. It's something cats have been doing for a very long time, long before they ever shared homes with people who leave breakable things on raised surfaces. Welcome to Just Paw Facts. Today, we're talking about why cats knock things off tables, shelves, and counters, even when it looks intentional, and even when it happens right in front of you. By the end of this video, the behavior won't feel quite as mysterious, and it might even feel a little predictable once you understand what your cat is actually responding to in those moments. Because when you live with a cat, you're not just sharing space with a pet, you're sharing it with a very curious animal who is constantly learning how their world works, one object at a time. If you sit on the couch long enough and really watch your cat move through the room, you start to notice that they aren't using the space the way you do. You walk through the house like it's flat, like everything happens at floor level, and the rest of the furniture is just there to support your lifestyle. Your cat, on the other hand, moves through the room like it's stacked, almost like each piece of furniture unlocks a new level. They don't just walk across the floor and stop. They step onto a chair, then onto the table, then maybe onto the back of the couch, and if you're unlucky, from there onto a shelf you really hope they hadn't noticed yet. To a cat, the room isn't finished just because the furniture is in place. It's layered, and every layer is worth exploring. Height matters to cats in a way that's easy to forget when you live on 2 feet. Being up high feels safer to them, it gives them a better view of what's going on, and it lets them observe without being in the middle of everything. In the wild, that instinct helps them survive. And indoors, it doesn't just disappear. It just gets redirected onto tables, counters, and anything else that puts them a little above the ground. Once a cat claims a new surface, they don't treat it like a place to politely sit. They start interacting with it. They walk carefully at first, placing their paws slowly, paying attention to what feels solid and what doesn't. Cats don't automatically trust a surface just because it looks stable. They confirm it, and one of the easiest ways to confirm it is to see how the things on that surface behave. That's usually when the paw comes out. When your cat taps an object, they aren't doing it randomly or mindlessly. They're checking it. They're learning whether it slides easily, whether it tips, and whether it reacts at all when touched. In nature, that kind of testing matters. A branch might hold weight, or it might break, and a surface that looks safe might not be safe at all. Your cat's brain doesn't know the difference between a wild environment and your dining room table, so it treats both the same way. Edges are especially interesting to cats because edges create consequences. An object in the middle of a table doesn't promise much, but an object near the edge almost always does. A small push near an edge can turn into a big change, and cats are very tuned in to that kind of cause and effect. This is why it often looks like your cat is choosing objects that are already halfway to falling. They aren't being sneaky or planning anything dramatic. They're just drawn to situations where their actions produce clear results. When something slides, tips, and then disappears over the edge with sound and movement, that moment delivers a lot of information all at once. And cats remember it. They build mental maps of their environment, storing away which surfaces are stable, which ones wobble, and which objects respond in interesting ways. That's why the behavior doesn't look clumsy or accidental. Your cat already knows what's going to happen. They're confirming what they've learned, sometimes because they want to be sure, and sometimes because the answer is still satisfying. So when your cat calmly pushes something off a table and watches it fall without flinching, they aren't being careless. They're interacting with a space they understand very well, one layer at a time, in a world where gravity reliably does the rest of the work. Once you start seeing your home the way your cat does, another piece of the puzzle usually falls into place, often right around the moment you say, "You already knocked that off," while your cat looks at you like that information is brand new. Cats are wired to notice movement in a way that's very different from how we do. Their brains are built to catch tiny changes, the kind that are easy for humans to miss. A slight wobble, a slow slide, a hesitation right before something tips. All of that grabs their attention because in the wild, those small movements are the ones that matter most. When your cat taps an object and it moves even a little, that's already interesting to them. When it slides across a surface or leans toward the edge, that interest deepens. And when it finally falls, creating sound and motion and suddenly changing where it exists in the room, that moment checks every box a cat's brain cares about. This is why cats don't just knock things over and walk away. They watch. They follow the object with their eyes as it falls, and they often peer over the edge afterward to see where it went. They aren't feeling bad about it, and they aren't surprised. They're completing the experience, taking in the full result of what they started. Over time, cats also learn which objects create the most interesting movement. Pens roll and disappear, keys slide, spin, and make noise, cups tip in dramatic ways, and anything with liquid adds a whole extra layer of chaos that cats did not ask for, but will absolutely observe. Your cat doesn't understand physics in a human sense, but they do understand which objects reliably produce the best reactions. And movement doesn't stop with the object. When something hits the floor, the room often changes. You move, you speak, you react. From a cat's perspective, the environment didn't just respond, it became more alive. A quiet room suddenly has energy, and your cat notices that just as clearly as they notice the object falling. This is why knocking things off tables tends to happen more when nothing else is going on. If the room is already active, if you're moving around or playing with your cat, there's no need to create additional stimulation. But when everything feels still, that small push becomes a very efficient way to introduce movement back into the space. So when your cat slowly reaches out and nudges something toward the edge, they aren't acting out or trying to cause trouble. They're responding to a room that feels too quiet, using instincts that are deeply wired into how they experience the world. For a cat, movement is information, and sometimes the easiest way to get that information is to let gravity do what it always does. There's usually a moment right after the object hits the floor when your cat looks over at you. And it's not the kind of look people describe as guilt or defiance, even though it gets interpreted that way a lot. It's more like a quick check-in, the same way someone might glance around a room after they do something to see what changed. Your cat isn't shocked, and they aren't sorry. They're paying attention. What's easy to miss is that this moment didn't start with the object falling. It started earlier, the first time your cat ever knocked something off a table and noticed that the room suddenly came alive. You reacted, maybe without even thinking about it, because that's what people do when something breaks the quiet or hits the floor unexpectedly. Your voice changed, you moved, you stood up, and suddenly your cat had learned something important about how their environment works. Cats are extremely good at noticing patterns, especially patterns that involve cause and effect, and once they connect an action with a reliable outcome, that connection sticks. Knocking something off the table doesn't just move the object, it changes the atmosphere in the room, and to a cat, that matters more than we realize. A quiet space becomes active, a still human becomes an interesting one, and something new happens where nothing was happening before. This is why the behavior can feel so personal, even when it isn't. From your point of view, your cat is ignoring everything you care about, but from their point of view, They've discovered a simple way to interact with a space that otherwise feels a little dull. If you're sitting quietly scrolling on your phone or watching TV and not moving much, the room feels finished to you. But to a cat, it can feel empty of activity. One small push of the paw changes that immediately. What makes this tricky is that even negative reactions still count as reactions. Raising your voice, rushing over, clapping, or dramatically picking the object up and putting it back doesn't teach a cat that the behavior failed. It teaches them that the behavior worked because something happened as a result. From a cat's perspective, loud or emotional responses are still responses, and responses mean engagement. You'll often notice that cats are far less interested in knocking things off tables when you're already interacting with them in some way. If you're playing, talking to them, or even just moving around the room, there's no need for them to create extra stimulation because the environment already feels alive. The behavior tends to show up most when the room is quiet and nothing else is demanding their attention. So yes, in a way, your cat learned this habit from you, not because you trained them intentionally, but because cats are very good at figuring out what reliably changes their world. They don't see it as misbehavior or testing boundaries. They see it as cause and effect playing out exactly the way it always has. And gravity, unfortunately, is very consistent. If you've ever watched your cat knock something off the table and then immediately look around like they're waiting for their next assignment, you might have had the strange thought that your cat seems busy. Not busy in a helpful way, obviously, but busy like they've decided this is now part of their routine. That feeling isn't wrong. Cats are curious by nature, but curiosity doesn't stay light and playful forever. When there isn't much else going on, curiosity slowly turns into something more structured. It becomes a way to fill time, to create purpose, and to make sure the world still responds the way it's supposed to. In a home where food appears on schedule and danger is mostly limited to the vacuum cleaner, cats don't get many chances to use the instincts they were born with, so they invent opportunities. This is where boredom quietly enters the picture, not as laziness, but as unused energy. An indoor cat might sleep a lot, but that doesn't mean their brain is tired. Their body may be comfortable, but their instincts are still waiting for something to do. When there's no prey to stalk, no territory to patrol, and no real challenges to solve, the environment starts to feel predictable in a way that isn't satisfying. Knocking things off tables becomes a solution to that problem. It's simple, it's reliable, and it turns a dull moment into something interesting without requiring much effort. A cat doesn't need to run or jump or chase anything to do it. They just need to notice what's nearby and let gravity handle the rest. From their point of view, it's an efficient use of energy with a guaranteed result. You'll notice this behavior tends to show up more at certain times of day, especially when your cat has already slept for hours and the house is quiet. They wake up, stretch, hop onto a surface, and suddenly it's like they're checking to see if the world still works the same way it did earlier. The table hasn't moved. The objects are still there. The experiment is ready. What makes it feel almost intentional is how calm they are about it. There's no rush, no frantic energy, no sense that they're doing something forbidden. Your cat isn't acting out. They're settling into a task they've done before and know how to complete. Strangely, it becomes a small job they've given themselves, something that breaks up the day and gives them a sense of control over their surroundings. This is also why the behavior can repeat even when you've already reacted to it. From a cat's perspective, repeating the action doesn't mean they forgot what happened last time. It means they remember exactly what happened and decided it was worth doing again. The result was interesting. The environment changed, and for a moment, the room felt less empty. Cats don't need variety the way humans do, but they do need engagement. When that engagement isn't coming from toys, playtime, or interaction, they look for it elsewhere. Tables, shelves, and counters just happen to be very convenient places to find it. So when your cat knocks something off the table in the middle of an otherwise quiet afternoon, it's not a sign of mischief or defiance. It's a sign that your cat has time, energy, and a brain that wants something to work on. They aren't trying to cause trouble. They're giving themselves something to do. And unfortunately for your belongings, it's a job they're very good at. At some point, usually after you've seen this happen in more than one house or with more than one cat, you start to notice that not all cats knock things off tables with the same enthusiasm. Some cats do it constantly, like it's part of their personality, while others might only do it occasionally or barely at all. That difference can make the behavior feel even more confusing, especially if you're comparing your current cat to one you had before, who never seemed interested in your belongings. A lot of that comes down to who your cat is as an individual. Cats, just like people, have different energy levels, different ways of engaging with the world, and different thresholds for boredom. A younger cat or a cat with a lot of mental energy is far more likely to interact with their environment in active ways. They're still learning, still testing, and still looking for things that respond. An older cat might already understand the room well enough that they don't feel the need to keep running the same experiments, or they might simply prefer a nap over another physics demonstration. Personality plays a role too. Some cats are natural explorers who want to interact with everything around them, while others are more content to observe from a distance. A curious, confident cat is more likely to push boundaries, climb higher, and investigate objects than a cat who prefers sticking to familiar routines. Neither type is better or worse, they're just different ways of moving through the same space. The environment matters as well. Cats who live in smaller spaces or spaces that don't change much are more likely to look for stimulation wherever they can find it. If the layout of the room stays the same day after day, the objects on the table become one of the few variables your cat can interact with. On the other hand, cats who have access to window views, climbing structures, or regular playtime often have other outlets for their curiosity, which can make table items less appealing. You might also notice that some cats only do this behavior at certain times, like late at night or early in the morning, when the house is quiet and everyone else is still or distracted. Those are the moments when the environment feels the most empty to a cat, and a small action can make a big difference in how stimulating the space feels. Even how you respond can shape how often it happens. Cats who learn that knocking something off a table reliably creates interaction are more likely to repeat the behavior than cats whose environment doesn't change much when it happens. Over time, these patterns settle in and become part of how your cat chooses to engage with their world. So when you see a cat who seems especially dedicated to pushing objects off surfaces, it's usually not because they're more mischievous or more difficult than other cats. It's because their personality, energy level, and environment all line up in a way that makes this behavior particularly rewarding. They're not doing something strange or unusual for a cat. They're doing something that makes sense for them. And if that happens to involve your favorite mug more often than you'd like, that's just unfortunate timing. This is usually the point where people finally ask the question they've been circling the whole time, because even after you understand the instincts behind the behavior, it still feels very intentional when your cat does it right in front of you. Your cat waits until you're watching, slowly nudges the object forward, and then looks at you as if they're checking whether you noticed, which makes it hard not to assume there's some kind of message being sent. What happens next is what matters to them. The object moves, the sound fills the room, and suddenly the space feels different than it did a moment ago. Your reaction is part of that change, not because your cat wants to upset you, but because you are one of the most dynamic elements in the room. When you move, speak, or shift your attention, your cat registers that just as clearly as they register the object falling. That look people describe as smug or guilty is really just your cat paying attention. They're observing the outcome, the same way they watch where the object lands or listen to the noise it makes when it hits the floor. From their perspective, the behavior worked the way it usually does, and they're taking in the result. This is also why the action tends to be slow and deliberate rather than rushed or sneaky. Your cat isn't trying to get away with anything. They already know what's going to happen and have decided the outcome is acceptable. The behavior feels calm because it is calm, and that calmness is part of what makes it feel so deliberate to us. It helps to remember that cats experience the world as a collection of opportunities for interaction rather than a set of rules to follow. If an object exists in their space and responds when touched, it's fair game for exploration. From your cat's point of view, placing something near the edge of a table is almost an invitation, not a boundary. So when your cat knocks something off the table and then looks at you, they aren't being petty or dramatic. They're engaging with their environment in a way that makes sense to them, using instincts that have been shaping cat behavior for thousands of years. It only feels personal because you're standing close enough to watch it happen. By the time most people reach this point, they aren't really asking how to stop their cat from knocking things off tables completely, because deep down, they already know that's probably not realistic. What they're really asking is how to make it happen less often without turning their house into a constant negotiation or feeling like they're in a silent standoff with an animal who clearly has more patience. The key thing to understand is that this behavior doesn't come from disobedience, so it won't disappear through correction. Cats aren't ignoring rules when they do this, because rules aren't part of how they understand the world. What they are responding to is a lack of engagement, a lack of movement, or a moment where their instincts don't have anywhere better to go. When cats have regular outlets for their curiosity and energy, the urge to create stimulation by knocking things off tables tends to fade into the background. It doesn't vanish completely, because curiosity never really goes away, but it becomes less urgent. Playtime that lets your cat stalk, chase, and pounce gives their brain the kind of feedback it's looking for, which makes everyday objects less tempting as entertainment. The environment matters too. When cats have spaces designed for climbing, observing, and interacting, like cat trees or window perches, they're less likely to treat every table as a testing platform. Those options give them places where exploration is expected and allowed, which reduces the need to turn your furniture into a science lab. It also helps to think about placement rather than punishment. Objects left near edges are always going to invite attention, because edges are where consequences happen. Moving fragile or important items away from those zones isn't giving in to bad behavior. It's just adjusting your space to match the animal you live with. In a house with a cat, some surfaces are simply more decorative in theory than in practice. Most importantly, reacting less dramatically can quietly change the pattern over time. When knocking something off the table doesn't lead to a big shift in the room, it becomes less rewarding as a way to create engagement. That doesn't mean ignoring your cat altogether, but it does mean choosing when and how to give attention, so it isn't accidentally tied to behavior you'd rather see less of. None of this is about winning or losing. It's about understanding why the behavior exists and working with it instead of against it. When a cat's needs are met in other ways, knocking things off tables slowly stops being their most interesting option. Living with a cat means sharing your space with an animal that never stops being curious about how the world works. Your furniture, your shelves, and yes, your tables are all part of that world, and from your cat's perspective, they're full of opportunities to learn, test, and interact. When your cat knocks something off a table, they aren't being mean or dramatic. They're responding to a space that feels a little too quiet, or a moment that needs something to happen. It only feels intentional because cats are very good at doing things calmly and confidently, even when those things involve gravity and your favorite mug. Understanding the behavior doesn't make it disappear, but it does make it easier to live with. It shifts the moment from frustration to recognition, and sometimes even to a small laugh, especially when you realize your cat has been running the same experiment for years and is still perfectly satisfied with the result. If you enjoyed learning why cats do what they do, like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who lives with a cat that treats the table like a testing ground.